Здравейте, драги зрители! It is my pleasure to welcome you into the month of dynastic appreciation, which we will begin with The Twice Dead King, Ruin, by author Nate Crowley. For once, as a bit of a spoiler, this is not research for a particular topic, and was instead a venture for satisfaction, whose cost was up to negotiation. Our previous two monthly topics were somewhat centered on sensation, both the repulsive and the degenerate. As a capstone and contrast, in this final month of the trio, the main topic of conversation we will be going over is significantly more sterile. Or is it? I was very curious to see new characters different from the most well-known ones in the Necron roster that we've already explored media of, and what perspective they could bring to the overall faction. And I have to say, taking this deal was most definitely not disappointing. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Very quickly before we begin, please like and share the video, as well as subscribe to the channel for future uploads. We are drawing very closer to the 1000 subscriber mark, and when we reach it, as a special, we will be killing Abaddon. So sign on, and be sure not to miss it. Also, if you want to support the channel a little extra, you can do so with a coffee donation via the link in the description. With all that out of the way, let us awaken the tombs and venture into their bowels, so we can obtain their secrets. We're taken to the fringe world of Seth, overseen by Altix, prince of the Ithacus dynasty. He was exiled there by his father Unas, their lineage's dynast, after a scuffle between himself and his older brother Joseris erupted into a physical altercation. A meek punishment, some might say, if they failed to consider the issues the younger Necron had to deal with, least of which was the demotion of rank and the isolation brought on by this new station. Save for the various other rejects or societal undesirables that made their way to Seth, either also in exile or gravitating towards those similar to themselves. That latter aspect related to the significantly more troubling and sinister plight blighting the local population, the spread of the flare virus, a mind-sundering affliction believed to have been created by Landragor, the Flare, the one Catan that was actually killed rather than being simply shattered in his final moments. The virus, or curse, deforms Necrons into feral beings that hunt living creatures in order to consume and drape themselves in their vandalized flesh, born from the desperation to return to their own days of life. Despite their disturbing presence and the fear of the madness they can spread, these flayed ones play a key role in dealing with a far more pressing matter that was forcing itself upon Altix: an orc invasion. After dealing with it, murdering a war boss in the process, Seth's defenders and their leader discover that this assault is part of a much larger greenskin migration caused by the encroachment of an imperial crusade pushing into and towards the heart of the Ithacus dynasty. Spurred by the fact that their garrison forces were woefully inadequate to stand in opposition to the humans, the decades-long absence of communication from their crown world, and the discovery that his best friend, their minute fleet's admiral, has begun succumbing to the flare virus as well, Altix elected to violate his exile and personally venture to his former home of Antikef in order to petition his father for aid. To his great despair, when he reached the Crown World, he found it degenerated into a horror show suffocated in the flare curse's grasp, with the dynast Unas twisted into a ghoulish fiend, no longer recognizing his progeny. A fall cultivated by the influence of his corrupt vizier, Himyun, who would entrap and mutilate Altix, intending to kill his consciousness with the flare curse by inducing it via the heavy physical damage. The young prince had to sacrifice a large portion of his memories in order to fend off the darkness of insanity, but he was able to endure until he was rescued. Among those who aided him was his brother Joseris. The pair were able to reconcile and destroy the vizier, as well as bringing a dignified death to their father. Regrettably, this reunion would not last long, as by the time of Altix's rescue, the Imperial Crusade had pushed deep into their dynasty's territory and had finally come to claim Antikef. The story concludes with Joseris sacrificing himself in order for his brother, and now inherited ruler of their bloodline, to escape with what little was left of their dynasty, and, hopefully, lead it to a better future. After Severed, I was wondering how his other works hold up, and after reading this book, I am pleased to say that Nate Crowley has maintained a splendid and consistent standard of quality. His exploration of the condition of life is quite the marvel, giving us the familiar angle of struggling to not lose yourself in the spiraling decline of your machine shell, but spiced up with the horror of devolving into something arguably worse. Similar to Xandrek, except here, the becoming flesh again aspect of madness is not some absurdist whimsy that may or may not be intentional, but a gruesome, slippery slope of viscera towards becoming like the infamous Am from the story I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. Except, instead of hateful, the condition is more animalistic, depressed, and frankly scared from the fact that your brain is experiencing its normal bodily functions, not functioning, causing one to struggle as if drowning in an ocean of darkness. While it definitely sounds scary to live through, the detailed delve into the suffering from being deprived of existence in the flesh piqued my interest with how similar it was to something else. In essence, what the necrons afflicted by the flare curse suffer from when their minds break is deprivation from sensation. Now, what else deals with this? A thing that could possibly be the salvation for the flayed ones. A thing that is known to be able to affect the mechanical practically as much as the living. Chaos. At the risk of upsetting some of the metallic purists, to me, this seems like an excellent narrative thread from which the old chaos automatons that the Necrons started as can be brought back to the setting. Some dynasty struggling with the flare curse being infiltrated by, say, Slanesh, allowing them to retain their senses of self as long as they indulge as much as their unliving forms can allow, in excess. Possibly even mutating the flesh they coat themselves with, melding it with their necrodermis, in order to create a brand new breed of soulless horror that dances to the strings of She Who Thirsts. Puppets with which to entertain herself, even if they do not personally provide nourishment to her. Or in other words, toys. I'm now gonna swiftly move away from that hypothetical line of thinking before any jimmies get rustled. Other than the excellent probe into the condition of life, the twice-dead king, Ruin, shares with us a plethora of frankly adorable characters, ranging from a somewhat degraded garrison commander that wishes he had gotten the rank of Varguard, a common soldier elevated in authority and charged with ensuring all subjects of the dynasty complied with the decree of biotransference, who is now afflicted with Destroyer Curse, an edgy rogue who awoke earlier than expected and elevated himself to the rank of Nemesaur by killing everyone on his homeworld that outranked him while they slept, and many others. Their fate remains a mystery by the books end, so I'm hoping for most of them to make a return in its sequel. My personal favorite, however, has got to be the gaggle inside of Altix's head. Several sub-minds that are copies of his own, but each dedicated to a specialization of some kind, that do help the prince with his trials and tribulations, but also have an incredibly charming banter to them. And, in their regard, I find it most amusing that Altix was the one who commissioned having them installed in his engrams, but gets annoyed by their bickering. But when they harmonize and all work together, their abilities are something to behold. Sawed off weaponized autism, here comes weaponized schizophrenia. The one thing I didn't really enjoy about the book, however, has got to be how weak the Necrons were presented as. In Severed, that feeling is rectified by the main opponent being other Necrons, but in Ruin, the mark is ever so slightly missed. Yeah, okay, it's a smaller dynasty that is also far from being fully awakened and is suffering from an internal crisis due to the growing rampancy of the flare virus, but having them essentially run scared from Imperials just feels wrong and off-putting. And no, the irony of me being an Imperial fanboy and saying that is not lost on me. Thinking on it, I'd say the main reason for this feeling is the disproportionality of the two sides. It is, without a doubt, a very subjective nitpick, but a crusade big enough to displace so many orcs in its path that they form a Wa that by itself was being an issue for the Necrons, going after such a supposedly frail dynasty just feels wrong. or if it just happened to go in that direction rather than being an intentional crusade for the purpose of fighting the Ithacus necrons, is plain unsatisfying. Personally, I believe that the orcs should have remained as the overarching force, threatening to sweep away our protagonist's realm as a tidal wave of violence, since thematically they are more suited for this role against their ancient nemeses. Having gone through 2 of his works now, I have to say that Nate Crowley has firmly solidified himself as a top-quality author in my book. Given the respect, tact, and originality that does not stray from the vibe of the universe's canon with which he handles necrons, I'm very interested in checking out his takes on other factions. From what I've seen in his resume, he has worked on some orc books, which is very funny, since the greenskins are the polar opposites of the soulless, metallic, depresso dispensers he has presented us with so far. Maybe GW should throw some Eldar his way, so that the elves can finally be handled with more care than usual. Refocusing on our current topic of conversation, if you have read The Twice Dead King, Ruin yourself, what did you think about it? Which among the colorful tapestry of personas managed to catch your fancy as a favorite? How did you feel about the overall doom of the Ithacus dynasty? And did the Imperial Crusade fulfill the role it was given, or would you have preferred a different overarching enemy for the Necrons to contend with? Let me know in the comments below. As for next time, we'll be going through an exploration of an older question longtime followers of the channel may remember. Definitely look forward to a bigger video than usual, which I hope will be to your liking. But that is enough teasing for now. Until our next meeting, I wish you a lovely rest of your day. Doviđenje.